Sergeant First Class Martinez told her she was just there to haul equipment and stay out of the way. What happened next at Forward Operating Base Sentinel turned a supply run into legend, when the impossible shot needed to be made in complete darkness. Corporal Kira Thorne proved that some people see the world differently than others. Corporal Kira Thorne sat in the passenger seat of the Humvee, watching the Afghan landscape blur past in shades of brown and gold. At 27, she had the quiet stillness that came from growing up in the backwoods of Montana, where silence wasn't empty but full of information. Her hands rested loosely on her M4 carbine, fingers naturally finding the familiar grooves worn smooth by countless training sessions. Forward Operating Base Sentinel squatted against the horizon like a collection of shipping containers and sandbags, which wasn't far from the truth. This was her third deployment, but her first time assigned to a logistics unit rather than her usual reconnaissance role. The Army had decided her skills were better used moving supplies than gathering intelligence, a decision that still stung. After 6 months, the base buzzed with the controlled chaos of a military installation preparing for a major operation. Soldiers moved with purpose between the motor pool and supply depot, their conversations a mix of nervous energy and dark humor. Kira had learned to read the signs early in her career, and everything here pointed to something big happening soon. If you want to hear more stories about veterans whose true abilities were hidden until the moment they mattered most, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Kira's exceptional marksmanship hadn't come from Army training alone. Growing up on her grandfather's ranch outside Kalispell, she'd learned to shoot before she could properly hold a rifle. Her grandfather, Staff Sergeant William Thorne, had served 3 tours in Vietnam as a sniper and brought home skills that most people never knew existed. Every morning before school, starting when she was 8, Kira would meet him at the shooting range he'd built behind the barn. But this wasn't casual target practice. William taught her to read wind patterns in the way grass moved, to calculate bullet drop by feeling barometric pressure in her bones, to control her heartbeat so completely that she could fire between beats. By age 16, she could consistently hit targets at distances that made seasoned hunters shake their heads in disbelief. Her father, a hunting guide, had passed down different skills, tracking patience, and the ability to move through wilderness without leaving a trace. Her mother, a former Army medic, taught her field medicine and the importance of staying calm under pressure. The combination created someone uniquely suited for reconnaissance work. When Kira enlisted at 18, her initial scores on the rifle range were so high that instructors accused her of cheating until they watched her shoot. She'd earned her place in reconnaissance units through pure skill, not politics or connections. That made her current assignment to logistics feel like punishment rather than placement. The morning briefing should have been routine, but Sergeant First Class Martinez made it clear that Kira's presence was barely tolerated. Standing before a map of the local area, he addressed the 12 soldiers who would accompany the supply convoy to the remote outpost at Firebase Delta. Martinez had been running logistics operations for 8 years and believed in keeping things simple and predictable. He assigned Kira to ride shotgun in the lead vehicle, with explicit instructions: carry the radio, watch for IEDs, and let the experienced soldiers handle any problems that arose. When Kira mentioned that the planned route took them through an area where her reconnaissance unit had identified suspicious activity just 2 months earlier, Martinez cut her off with barely concealed irritation. The route had been cleared by intelligence, he said, and logistics specialists didn't need input from soldiers who thought they knew better than the planning officers. Staff Sergeant Johnson, a veteran of 5 deployments, supported Martinez's dismissal. He'd seen too many soldiers try to impress their new units with stories about their previous assignments. In his experience, people who bragged about special skills usually couldn't back them up when it mattered. The other soldiers picked up on their leader's attitude quickly. Kira found herself excluded from the informal conversations that bonded teams together, treated as cargo rather than a teammate. When she suggested modifications to their communication protocols based on lessons learned from reconnaissance operations, Martinez told her that her job was to follow orders, not give advice. The dismissal stung not because of wounded pride, but because Kira recognized the signs of a unit that had become comfortable with routine. In reconnaissance, comfort got people killed. She'd learned to trust her instincts about terrain, timing, and enemy behavior. But here, those instincts were viewed as unnecessary complications to an already established system. As they loaded the vehicles that morning, Kira kept her observations to herself, knowing that voicing concerns would only reinforce their opinion, that she didn't understand her place in the unit. Sitting in the Humvee as they rolled through the gates of Fob Sentinel, Kira felt the familiar weight of being misunderstood. This wasn't about ego or recognition. It was about the responsibility that came with skills earned through years of discipline and sacrifice. Her grandfather had taught her that abilities meant nothing if you couldn't use them when lives depended on it. She thought about the last conversation with her grandfather before this deployment. He'd been dying of lung cancer, his voice reduced to a whisper, but his words had been clear. Don't let them waste what you've learned. Sometimes the hardest part of serving isn't fighting the enemy. It's convincing your own people to let you do what you're trained for. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now carrying a radio instead of a sniper rifle, moving supplies instead of gathering intelligence that could save lives. 6 months ago, her recommendations had helped prevent an ambush that would have killed 15 soldiers. Now she was told to keep quiet and let others make the tactical decisions. That's the convoy moved deeper into territory she'd studied extensively. During her reconnaissance missions, Kira found herself automatically cataloging potential threats, calculating fields of fire, and noting changes in the terrain since her last patrol. The skills didn't turn off just because her role had changed, but expressing them only seemed to create more friction with her new unit. 20 minutes into the convoy, Kira's radio crackled with a transmission that made her blood run cold. Firebase Delta reported movement in the hills overlooking their position, possible enemy reconnaissance preparing for an attack. The outpost requested immediate support, but the nearest combat units were 4 hours away. Martinez made the decision to continue the mission. Firebase Delta needed the ammunition and medical supplies they were carrying, and intelligence indicated the area was secure. When Kira pointed out that enemy scouts often preceded larger attacks, Martinez reminded her that her job was operating the radio, not interpreting intelligence reports. As they approached the valley that led to Firebase Delta, Kira noticed subtle changes in the landscape that her training had taught her to recognize. Disturbed earth near what should have been natural rock formations, unusual patterns in the scrub brush, and most concerning of all, the complete absence of local wildlife. These were signs that experienced soldiers had taken positions and were waiting. She tried twice more to voice her concerns, each time being shut down more firmly than before. Johnson suggested that her reconnaissance experience was making her see threats where none existed, a common problem when soldiers transitioned between different types of units. Martinez ordered her to focus on her assigned duties and stop trying to second-guess the intelligence professionals who had planned their route. The final radio transmission from Firebase Delta came just as they entered the valley. The outpost was under attack by approximately 30 insurgents positioned in the surrounding hills. The convoy was driving directly into the same elevated positions that the enemy was using to pin down the Firebase. Martinez finally understood. They were heading into an ambush, but by then they were already in the kill zone. The first rocket-propelled grenade exploded 50 meters ahead of the lead vehicle, followed immediately by automatic weapons fire from 3 different positions. In the hills above them, Martinez screamed into his radio for air support while Johnson tried to coordinate a fighting withdrawal. But they were caught in open terrain with limited cover. Kira didn't ask for permission this time. She grabbed her rifle and the spotting scope from her pack, then moved to a position behind a large boulder that offered a clear view of the hillside. Through the scope, she could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions, but one location caught her attention immediately. 700 meters uphill, partially concealed behind a cluster of rocks, a sniper was methodically engaging the Firebase Delta positions. His elevated angle and disciplined fire pattern suggested he was the key to the entire ambush. Take him out, and the coordinated attack would lose its effectiveness. Martinez saw her preparing to shoot and shouted that the range was impossible, that she should focus on closer targets. But Kira had already calculated wind speed from the movement of dust patterns, estimated the bullet drop based on the steep, uphill angle, and controlled her breathing to match the rhythm her grandfather had taught her 20 years ago. The shot had to be perfect. At this distance, in these conditions, with lives hanging in the balance, there was no margin for error. She settled into the shooting position that had become as natural as breathing, found the microscopic pause between heartbeats, and squeezed the trigger with the same gentle pressure her grandfather had drilled into her muscle memory. The enemy, Sniper dropped instantly, his rifle clattering down the rocky slope. Within seconds, the coordinated fire began to falter as the insurgents lost their primary coordinator. The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but it changed everything. Without their sniper directing fire, the ambush lost coordination. Firebase Delta's defenders gained the initiative they needed to break the attack, and the convoy was able to establish effective defensive positions. Martinez stared at Kira with something approaching awe. 700 meters, uphill, under fire. With a single shot, Johnson quietly asked to see her rifle, examining it with the respect reserved for precision instruments in the hands of true professionals. By the time air support arrived 30 minutes later, the engagement was over. The after-action report would note that Corporal Thorne's elimination of the enemy sniper had been the decisive factor in preventing casualties among both the convoy and Firebase Delta personnel. But the real change happened in the smaller moments. Afterward, Martinez personally recommended Kira for transfer back to a reconnaissance unit, admitting that her skills had been wasted in logistics. Johnson spent the return journey asking detailed questions about advanced marksmanship techniques, genuinely interested in learning from someone whose abilities he'd initially dismissed. The other soldiers who had excluded her from their conversations now sought her input on everything from route planning to equipment selection. They understood that competence transcended job descriptions and that some people possessed skills that couldn't be easily categorized or dismissed. Kira had proven that being underestimated was often the best tactical advantage of all, and sometimes the most important shot is the one nobody expects you to be able to make.